Sup, guys? 0-1 yesterday. Obviously, not what we wanted. Got pretty unlucky in that one because Reese Olson, even though he was losing the game, it was 2-1 all the way into the sixth inning, I think. But Reese Olson got knocked out of the game in the third inning after he took a line drive off of his hip. He had a hip contusion and could not return to the game. So that's bad luck there. I mean, who knows if they would have won or not, but they certainly would have had a much better chance to win if their starter there stayed in the game. What can you do about that? It just becomes like a dead play at that point. They gave up a sixth spot, I think, in the sixth inning or seventh inning. Their bullpen had to get used more than they would have otherwise, obviously, and it's just bad. It's bad luck, man. At least if your starter stays in the game, you're probably looking at a low-scoring, close game going into the later innings there. Very unfortunate. Also, congratulations to the Edmonton Oilers who advanced last night with a Game 7 win over the Vancouver Canucks. Hockey, we have the conference finals set, which will start, I believe, tomorrow with the Eastern Conference, so we'll talk about that then. The NBA does actually start tonight with my Celtics, and I'm going to have a play on this one. Pacers, Celtics. We got a really high total in this one, man. It's up from 218.5 to 221.5 juice to the under. I mean, these are two of the best scoring teams in the NBA, so it makes sense that even though this is a playoff game, in game one, you do tend to get more defensive intensity. Well, yeah, I mean, that's true, but with these teams who have the ability to score to such a degree, it's like, where do you set this line? Like, what line even makes sense here? I don't even know. Looks like the line has moved up a bit. Like I said, 79% of the tickets are on the over. Not a surprise that the public is going to be coming in on the over in a game like this with a couple of the best offenses in basketball, obviously, but 83% of the cash also on the over. So it looks like there is some actual money coming in on the over too. I'm not looking to play this total in this game. I'm going to play the side, and I'm laying the points with the Celtics. I actually laid 9.5. It has been sitting at 10. I think the best you can get is 10, but that's, I think, probably okay too, even though it seems like you're laying a lot of points, laying 10. Celtics, huge favorite here. 10, it looks like it's going up through the 10 with juice. The public looks like they're kind of evenly split with 53% of the tickets on the Celtics, so not a huge majority on the Celtics, but 71% of the cash on the Celtics. So it looks like some of the bigger money is on the Celtics. And just looking at like polls and stuff online, it looks like people are basically handing Minnesota the championship at this point to some extent. And it's like, it just seems insane for people to be doing that. It seems like people on this series are way closer to evenly split than they should be, really. People think that the Celtics are choke artists and they choke in the playoffs, which is true. They have lost. They have made deep playoff runs in many seasons recently and not been able to win the championship. But, I mean, this is a series where the Celtics are a huge favorite, man. They should be able to take care of business in this one. The Celtics made the finals 2 years ago, and I think they might have extra motivation after what happened last year where they got off to such a bad start in the Eastern Conference Final in a similar position here where they were a favorite last year, but they were playing against a team that has more experience in Miami, last year with Jimmy Butler. Oh, man, does that mean did I just foreshadow Celtics Minnesota in the final? I don't know. It's possible, obviously, very possible. But Miami was a much more experienced team than this Pacers team is, and the Celtics probably remember that, man. They remember losing the first 3 games of that series, and they do not want a repeat of that in a series they were the home favorite and should have won, obviously, against Miami. They're an even bigger favorite here, so I think that all of that is probably going to have them focused coming into this game. The only question is, with the Celtics having had a bunch of time off, is there going to be rust coming in? And I keep saying that you have to contrast rust with rest, although it does seem like teams that come off like a fairly easy series, even if they do have time off, it doesn't like totally crush their momentum, whereas the team that played that grueling 7-game series like the Pacers just did, even though their momentum continues to carry, it's like they tend to have too much fatigue from exerting so much in that series, and that's what the Pacers had to do there. So I think this is a bad spot for the Pacers, even though they are continuing that momentum, and the Celtics have had multiple extra days off. I think it might actually just help the Celtics to kind of prepare for this and kind of get over like whatever fatigue they might have. But they had a much, much easier series against Cleveland where they didn't have to expend that much energy, and they didn't even play that well in the final few games in that series, really. So the Celtics might be refocused for that reason too, because they played against a Donovan Mitchell-less Cleveland team and beat them in those last two games, but not by a whole lot. So the Celtics might be considering that to be a little bit of a scare too, and might have to show up focused here. And they know they're against a team that scores a ton. But as the odds makers are telling you, the Celtics are the significantly better team. They're the only one of these two teams that actually has a defense. And the Celtics can score basically with the Pacers. They have arguably the Celtics are even better at scoring than the Pacers to some extent. So Celtics definitely the better team. I think the spot sets up nicely for the Celtics, laying the points with the Celtics, 9.5 or 10 here. So that is what we'll do. And we'll talk about the Western Conference game tomorrow, which I believe I'm going to be on that game as well. We'll see what happens there. Moving over to Major League Baseball. Quickly here, I have two plays here. There are a lot of games that I looked at and I said I almost want to do this, where I kind of lean to some of these teams that I think have starting pitching edges to some extent. I think San Francisco probably has a little bit of an edge with Logan Webb over Martin Perez, even though Webb's whip is not very good this season. Pittsburgh, I think, is also returning home from a road trip, if I'm not mistaken. So that's kind of a bad spot for Pittsburgh there. So I was looking to, it's only a 2-series road trip that kept them in the Central, in their own division, though. So I don't know. But looks like the line has gone up on San Francisco. But San Francisco has been playing well enough, and Pittsburgh's been playing poorly enough recently that San Francisco is actually a public road favorite in that one with less of the cash. So I can't quite do that one. I was looking at maybe Milwaukee with Robert Gasser, who has only made 2 starts ever in the majors against a Miami offense that is a bad offense to begin with and is unfamiliar to them. And Miami won yesterday. The problem is that Milwaukee had to go into their bullpen really early, and they actually used 7 relief pitchers yesterday. So there's no way I would be playing a full game on Milwaukee. And it looks like Milwaukee's public and the line has dropped on them. So I would be very wary of that, even though I think Gasser, there are some things to like about him, even though he's not like the most dominant, overpowering pitcher when he's a young guy who's facing bad hitters who have never seen him before. I think he has a slight edge there in the starting pitching matchup, at least over Rogers, who I don't think has been that great against Milwaukee, but it would only be a first 5-inning bet there. You definitely do not want to have to rely on Milwaukee's totally taxed bullpen there, so not going to be doing that one either. I think that Seattle probably has a little bit of an edge over the Yankees, even though Seattle won yesterday. The Yankees kind of a suspiciously short favorite at -150 because obviously they're the better team, but Seattle's certainly no pushover. Not a bad team, and I think it's a bad pitching matchup for New York, for the Yankees with Clark Schmidt, even though Schmidt continues to pitch pretty well this season. I think you got to see a regression out of him, man, because he's not that young, and based on his career stats, he's been with this Yankees team for a while, so it's like, what could have possibly really changed that much this season? I expect regression out of him. His stats against Seattle are not great, really, as far as I remember. I don't think they are. And I prefer Wu on Seattle, who's off to a decent start this season, too, even though he's not an overpowering pitcher either, but he is a young pitcher who's pretty unfamiliar to the opposing hitters. I think the Yankees did see him last year, but he did pretty well against them, but he's not totally unfamiliar to them. But the Yankees are a heavily public home favorite here, with the public expecting them to bounce back. I think liking the Yankees' really good record over Seattle, but probably undervaluing Seattle a bit, especially with Wu on the mound. I think Seattle does have a little bit of a pitching advantage there with the starting pitching matchup, in my opinion. Lean to Seattle there, and I lean to the White Sox as well. Toronto won pretty easily yesterday against the White Sox. White Sox had one of their 2 decent starters go in yesterday's game, Fedde, and he gave up 5 runs. He went pretty deep into the game, but that the amount of runs that he gave up is what did them in. Toronto also is a public home favorite, but looks like they actually have more of the cash than the tickets, and the line has moved up on Toronto. But Toronto has Yusei Kikuchi pitching for them, and his stats against these White Sox hitters, even though they're not very impressive hitters, Kikuchi has been pretty bad against them in his career. They have over 300 batting average against him in his career, whereas Garrett Crochet is pitching for the White Sox. I think that gives the White Sox a bit of an edge, at least earlier in this game. So I do lean to the White Sox side, especially in the first 5 innings. Toronto is only 0 for 5 lifetime against Crochet. They probably saw him as a reliever at some point. They haven't seen him this year. Crochet has been completely dominating this year, man. His ERA being in the 4s, which I think is worse than what Kikuchi's is this year. Very misleading ERA from Crochet because his whip is very, very good and is indicative that his ERA should be much better. And his strikeout walk numbers are insanely good this year, like some of the best in Major League Baseball. So I like Crochet in that one. And I probably would have a slight lean to Kansas City as well. Just running through all these games quickly. Even though Kansas City, of course, they hurt me yesterday and did me in. But Alec Marsh, I think, is the better of the two pitchers there over Casey Mize. Mize has decent stats this year, but definitely not an overpowering pitcher. Marsh, I think, is a bit younger and still kind of developing. Looks like he's maybe kind of coming into his own here and starting to become a pretty good pitcher. I believe Detroit has actually never faced him before, so I think he has a bit of an edge there. And Mize has bad numbers against Kansas City over his career. They have over 300 batting average against him. Kansas City, it does look like there's been reverse line movement against them, though, which gives me a little bit of hesitation there as they've dropped to a very slight favorite to the point where they're not even actually the favorite almost, which is kind of weird. And they are pretty public, although I do see a higher cash percentage on them too, but it looks like the lines moved down on them, so I don't know. That, and I think Houston has a huge mismatch as well with Christian Javier over Griffin Canning, but Houston is a huge favorite. And same goes for Minnesota. Minnesota's coming off an embarrassing loss, but I think Joe Ryan is the way, way better pitcher over Patrick Corbin. Problem is that Ryan actually has bad numbers against Washington. Corbin actually has good numbers against Minnesota. So it's like, what do you expect there? Do you rely on the individual matchups there between these specific pitchers and these specific hitters? Because I think you do have to weigh that in. Or do you look at these pitchers' careers as a whole and think, well, Ryan is obviously the way better overall pitcher? It's tough to say there. Minnesota's laying a huge road price there, and they are slightly public, but they are coming off an embarrassing loss, and they have the better overall pitcher. It's just in this specific matchup, maybe he is not the better pitcher, but he himself is probably looking to bounce back too because he had a bad outing in his most recent start against the Yankees, which I thought Ryan would be better in that one. That one hurt me. All right, moving on to the actual 2 plays I have today. These are both situational plays, and it looks like we have the cash discrepancy on both of these two, even though they both might be slightly public. I'm fading the Atlanta Braves now. This is one spot where I'm going to fade them. Atlanta and San Diego both played yesterday, and they both played a doubleheader yesterday, so they are certainly at a rest disadvantage. The reason I'm not playing against San Diego here, though, is because Cincinnati is returning home from a road trip, so I just can't quite do that, even though Cincinnati had the day off yesterday. San Diego played 2 games, so there is a rest edge there for Cincinnati, but Cincinnati's in one of those return home distraction spots, and they're the underdog, so I don't love that. Musgrove is pitching for San Diego, though, and he's been pretty bad so far this year, and Abbott's been better than he has. I do still have a lean to Cincinnati in that one. San Diego is still like a public road favorite there with a bit less of the cash on them, even though it looks like the line has flipped them to the favorite. I have a slight lean to Abbott and Cincinnati there, but it's not strong enough for me to want to actually do it because I don't want to play on the team returning home from the road trip. But San Diego has a lot of things that are a disadvantage there. I think they have the worst of the starting pitching matchup. I think even against these opposing hitters, I think they actually have a little bit of the worst of it too. I forget, though. I would have to look. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that. Yeah, San Diego had the rest disadvantage for sure, having played a doubleheader yesterday. But the other team that played a doubleheader yesterday, I think, is in a spot where we can nicely go against them, which is the Atlanta Braves. Atlanta, everybody knows the Braves are one of the best teams in baseball, but they are facing the Chicago Cubs on the road, and the Cubs are one of the better teams in baseball too. Atlanta has no time off. They just played at home, so they are starting a road trip, which does tend to be a little bit of a positive spot. You do tend to be focused when you start a road trip, but Atlanta just played a doubleheader yesterday against San Diego, man, and now they have to turn around right away, go out to Chicago and play this game. I think that's pretty difficult, and they're facing a Cubs team that I think is not even traveling and didn't play yesterday, so the Cubs have a big-time edge here, I would have to say, staying at home, and they're looking to bounce back from a bad series where they lost 3 out of 4 to the Pittsburgh Pirates. So Chicago, I think they're going to be ready. They're going to be focused, coming off a bad losing series like that. They lost the last game of the series, and they have Atlanta coming in, one of the best teams in baseball. I think Chicago should be focused for this, whereas, Atlanta coming off having to really tax themselves, playing 2 games yesterday to Chicago's 0. So Atlanta's certainly not in a great rest spot. Atlanta is still a favorite, although it looks like there is line movement moving against them. They were minus 127, it looks like, at one point. They're down to minus 118. So you can still get the Cubs as a home underdog here. 61% of the tickets are on the Cubs here. So it looks like the recreational bettors are somewhat onto it, or maybe they're just onto this starting pitching matchup. Although I don't know, because I think the starting pitching matchup, I think we have more of an edge to the Cubs than it would appear if you just look at the pitchers' ERAs and how they've done so far this year. It looks like it's gone down to now 58% of the tickets on the Cubs, so they're only very slightly public, but they have 77% of the cash. So I think more of the bigger money is indeed coming in on the Cubs here, and we've seen the line drop on Atlanta a bit in the direction of the Cubs. You can get this one at like plus 110 at least on the Cubs here. Yeah, plus 110. It looks like you can get on the Cubs here. And then looking at the starting pitching matchup, I do like the starting pitching matchup as well. Atlanta actually did not tax their pen as much as they potentially could have in a doubleheader yesterday, but I think they still used 5 or 6 relievers across the 2 games. So, of course, the Cubs still have an advantage there, too, because they didn't play at all. So their bullpen is going to be completely available, basically, whereas Atlanta's is basically half available at best. Charlie Morton is pitching for Atlanta. His stats are pretty good this year with a 3.52 ERA and 1.15 whip. So some of the public is probably going to see, this is going to be a pitching duel. This looks pretty good. Both of these pitchers have been good this year. These are 2 good teams, whatever. So the public is not going to be that heavily on the Cubs, as you can see in the market right now, probably for those reasons. But Morton, he's 40 years old, man. I mean, even though he has had a good start to this season, I expect you're going to have some regression out of him. Looking at what he's done in the recent seasons in his career, he has not had a season this good for multiple years at this point. You got to expect some regression here. Last year, he had a 1.43 whip. The ERA would be really good. Even though somehow he had a 3.64 ERA last year. He's been a good strikeout pitcher. Even this late in his career, he's been striking a lot of guys out, but he's wild. You've seen his walk numbers go up in the recent years, though, which isn't great. And throughout his career, he's got an ERA right at 4, basically, of 3.99 and 1.3 whip, which that whip is kind of indicative of his ERA should be actually a little bit higher than it is, but he sustained that throughout his career. But he's been like a mediocre pitcher, I would say, so I expect a bit of regression out of his stats this season. Even this season, he does have 44 strikeouts in 46 innings, which is not a horrible strikeout rate, especially for a guy who's this old. 36 hits allowed is pretty good. That's where he's really been the best. He has not allowed many hits, but he's faced a lot of weak offenses, man. He's faced the White Sox, the Mets twice, Miami. He faced Texas when they were kind of struggling. Cleveland is kind of mediocre. Really, the only good offenses he's faced are the Dodgers and the Cubs, which he actually faced the Cubs in his most recent outing. Both of these starters actually faced this opponent in their most recent outing, in that I think they played a series not that long ago, I guess, right? And the Braves actually lost 2 out of the 3 to the Cubs, but the Cubs actually also won the last game of that series. Or no, the Braves, won 2 out of the 3, So they won the series, but they lost the last game against the Cubs. So is there a quick revenge angle there? I don't really think so. It was a closely fought series, 2-1 series. And if there's any revenge, really, it's probably on the side of the Cubs because they lost the series, even though they took the last game of that series. Morton did not pitch well in that series. He had his worst start of the season, only going 3 innings, giving up 5 hits, 3 walks, a home run, 3 earned runs, and 4 runs in that game. So he struggled in that game against the Cubs. And even though his strikeout numbers are pretty good, his walk numbers are a little bit high this season, allowing 17 walks in those 46 innings this year. So his walk numbers are not terrific. And versus the Cubs hitters over his career, his numbers aren't that great. We have a big sample size to work with. The Cubs have hit him all right. They're 23 for 83 off him lifetime. with 6 doubles, a triple, 1 home run. He has a 21-9 strikeout walk ratio against him. So again, high strikeout number, but a high walk number too. Cubs, that amounts to a 277 batting average against Morton for their hitters lifetime and a 757 OPS. So not like the highest numbers that you would see for like an offense against an opposing pitcher, but over a big sample size, pretty decent numbers for these Chicago hitters against Morton. So I think Morton actually has a slight disadvantage here. I'm going with the much younger pitcher in Javier Assad, who is way younger. He's 14 years younger. This might be one of the biggest age discrepancies you'll ever see between the two starting pitchers. And he's pitching better this season, even though Morton has been pretty good this season. Assad has a 1.49 ERA and 1.03 whip this season. I mean, there's no way he can continue that. But he's also done that against some better offenses, really, too, against the Padres, the Mariners, Houston, Milwaukee, and then he faced Atlanta and had one of his best starts in his most recent starts. So maybe he's starting to pitch his best at the right time here coming into this game, or maybe he'll suffer a letdown. I don't know, but he had a 7-1 strikeout walk ratio in that one in 6 innings, no runs allowed, and only 4 hits. I think he was actually matched up against Morton in that one. So is Morton going to be focused because it's going to be revenge for him? I don't know. I think you got to figure Assad's still going to be focused too, because it is the Atlanta Braves coming in, and that is who he's facing. Overall this season, his stats are actually similar to Morton's, where he's got a decent strikeout rate, but it's lower than 1 per inning. Somewhat high walk rate, but it has kept the hits down. He's been even less hittable than Morton. He's only allowed 35 hits in 48 and a third innings, only 2 home runs. So the long ball has been rare against him too, and he's not allowed a home run since April 14th. He does have 15 walks, which is a bit too high. 42 strikeouts, not a horrible strikeout rate. Assad, much, much younger, and he came into the league 2 seasons ago, had a pretty high whip, but kept his ERA down. Improved last year with a better ERA, although similar, but a much better whip last year too. Stats overall pretty good last year, other than the fact that his walk number was a little bit too high, but he's never been really a great strikeout guy. His strikeout numbers are never really that good, but he's still able to keep opponents' offenses in check. And versus this hot Braves lineup, or very good hitting Braves lineup, his stats are actually better than Morton's are, although only slightly. But their Braves are 11 for 44 off him lifetime. He does have a 15-3 strikeout walk ratio against them, so a better strikeout walk ratio against them. He's allowed 2 doubles, a triple, 2 home runs off of them, so it amounts to a 250 batting average, whereas, what did I say, Morton's against Chicago is like 277 or something, so Assad has the better opponent batting average against them, and their OPSs are almost the same. It's a 790 OPS lifetime for for Assad against these Braves hitters, which isn't great. He has allowed too many extra base hits, really, but Morton's walked too many against them, and Morton's OPS is almost exactly the same. It's just slightly lower. It's 747, I think. So I think you give the edge to Assad. I think the younger pitcher who actually has the better stats this season and has had the better recent track record and has the somewhat better numbers against the opposing hitters this year. That coupled with the crazy rest situation, it's not that often that you get a team coming off a doubleheader against a team that didn't play at all yesterday. So a team played 2 fewer games just yesterday than the other team did. So I think that gives us an edge on the Cubs. Once we get into the bullpens, which I think probably both teams are going to wind up having to go to the bullpens here. Assad doesn't really pitch that deeply into games. We'll see what happens. Looks like we do have the market indicating on the Cubs side. So I'm on that one. And then the other one that I'm on is another situational spot here that I kind of like to look at, which is I'm going to fade the Oakland A's. And for some reason, it looks like the A's are up from -108 to -132. I don't understand how the A's could be that strong a favorite, really. I mean, what are you doing lining the A's like that? Which, of course, you could argue, well, that looks suspect. It looks suspicious. Like, why would the A's be that much of a favorite? Doesn't that mean you should consider that to be suspicious enough that the books are telling you something? I don't really know, man, because I don't like anything about it. I don't like the situation. I don't like the pitching matchup for Oakland. And what's there to like about Oakland? They've lost like 1 million games in a row here. They've lost 7 games in a row. They're returning home from a road trip, which is a terrible spot typically, where they went to Seattle, and then they went to the Central, to Houston and Kansas City, and now they're returning back to the West Coast. They do have a day off. Both of these teams didn't play yesterday. So the rest edge, I think, is kind of not there for one side or the other. But Oakland is returning home from a 3-series road trip, which is typically a bad spot, man. It's a distracted spot. Even if you did poorly on that road trip, you have like home distractions coming into play. You have home life to get back to. It tends to be a distraction spot for that team. So I think that's bad for Oakland. I don't know who Oakland is to be laying a price like that. Like, they've only won 2 games going all the way back to that ridiculous 20-4 win that they had over a bad Marlins team, which was way back on May 4th. Since then, they've won 2 games. It's like, what is there to like about this? Even though that was mostly playing against decent teams, Rangers, Mariners, Astros, and Royals. And yes, the Rockies are one of the other worst teams in baseball. That's for sure. That's true. But still, again, like, how could you be laying minus 132 if you're the Oakland A's? Even though, yeah, you get a little bit of home field advantage. But how much home field advantage do the A's even really have here? So I think the situational, like the travel spot, is definitely against the A's here. You do see 60% of tickets on the other side on Colorado. So it does look like Colorado's a bit public with the recreational bettors coming in and thinking that how could the A's be a heavy favorite like this? But you also see 71% of the cash on Colorado right now. So I think there is some bigger money coming in on Colorado here. And I agree with that. I think it's a bad spot for Oakland for the reason that I just stated. But I think the starting pitching matchup is also in favor of Colorado. As bad as Colorado's starting pitcher is, I think that helps them too. And Colorado, I think, has a bit of an edge travel-wise as well, because even though as far as the rest is concerned, yeah, they had yesterday off. They're mid-road trip right now, but they've been out on the West Coast starting on May 13th. So this is the third and final series that they're playing on the road trip. And yeah, a lot of times you tend to see a little bit of fatigue once the team has been out on the road for a while. But Colorado's already been on the West Coast for 2 series now, man. And they just played in San Francisco, so they're already in the Bay Area. So their travel spot is much, much better than Oakland's is, with Oakland having to return back to the Bay Area. Colorado's already been out there because they just played San Francisco, and they played a horrific series against San Francisco where they allowed 33 runs in 3 games and lost all 3 games. And finally had a less embarrassing game in the final game of that series. And that was coming off back-to-back sweeps, actually. So Colorado was actually starting to play pretty decently, sweeping Texas at home and then going to San Diego and sweeping San Diego. And San Diego's a decent team. That's not that easy to do. So Colorado has been playing somewhat better baseball than Oakland has over the recent stretch there. So I kind of like that, and doing it against some decent teams too. San Francisco did beat Colorado at Colorado back in early May. So maybe there's a little bit of a revenge angle coming in. I don't know. But San Francisco took 2 out of the 3, and Colorado was able to take the last game of that series, which, by the way, was a game where Colorado had their starter for today going. They've won each of his last 2 starts. They won actually each of his last 3. Cal Quantrill behind them in the last 3 games he started. They've won all of them, even though I don't think Quantrill is that good. He's pitching today, and he's at least a guy who has experience. I think he's probably overvalued generally based on his ERA being 3.66, which looks pretty good, but his whip is 1.32, which is not very good. And overall, his career stats kind of right around that, really. 3.82 ERA, 1.27 whip. So he's not like the worst pitcher. He's mediocre, basically. He had some decent seasons there with Cleveland. This is his first season with Colorado, actually. So he's having to play in a difficult pitching environment out in Colorado. They're in elevation. But now he gets to play in a much pitcher-friendly park, though, in Oakland, which I think probably will help him a little bit. And he's a veteran at this point, man. He's been around for a while. He's 29. He's never been a great strikeout pitcher, but he's always kind of had decent control, kept the walk numbers down a bit. And this year, his walk numbers aren't great, but generally he has. This year, he's walked 20 and 51 2/3, so that's not good. He has got to keep that down. 36 strikeouts. I mean, that's never been his game. Not a lot of strikeouts. 48 hits allowed is pretty good, though. So he hasn't allowed that many hits. He's allowed 7 home runs. But again, keeping in mind, I think a lot of those have come at home because, of course, he pitches in Colorado, man. Like, what can you expect there. I think only 2 out of the 7 have been home runs allowed on the road, and those were at Arizona in his first outing of the season, which you can kind of throw out, and that's also not a pitcher-friendly park, really. He's been pitching much, much better, though, as of late in the month of May. As I said, his last 3 starts, he's got at least 6 innings in all 3. They've won all 3 of those games. He's allowed only 14 hits in 19 2/3 in those games and had a 19-6 strikeout walk ratio. So he's pitching really well recently, even though he did walk 3 apiece in each of the last 2, which is not great. And in those games, he beat Pittsburgh. They don't have the greatest offense. San Francisco, who's oh, wait, why was I saying San Francisco? This isn't revenge against San Francisco. What am I saying? They're playing Oakland, right? Not San Francisco. My bad. Excuse me. I made a mistake there. But yeah, so he faced San Francisco there, and they're not the best offense either. But then he faced San Diego, pretty tough team to face. But it was in a pitcher-friendly park. But he did pretty well in that game too, against a decent offense. So Quantrill pitching a bit better as of late. I think his career track record is not horrible. And facing Oakland's hitters here, Oakland has not seen much of him, man. They only have 16 at-bats off him. Only 4 of their hitters have ever seen him. So maybe Quantrill has even a little bit of an extra edge there just because Oakland has for in large part not seen him before. But their hitters who have seen him also haven't done well. They're 3 for 16 off him lifetime with no extra base hits, 5 strikeouts, 1 walk. It's a very low 188 batting average and 423 OPS. So Quantrill starting to pitch well recently. His stats, I expect probably his whip to drop a bit. Maybe he'll start getting more command there based on what we've seen out of his career. I think that may be the case. And I think he's the better of these 2 pitchers, man. He's, the pitcher that has a better track record, a better career, really. He's up against Aaron Brooks for Oakland. Who the hell is Aaron Brooks? He's 34 years old. His stats look good this season with a 3.86 ERA and 1.14 whip, but he only made 1 start, man. He had a good start against Houston. I don't really know how, or he had a 5-1 strikeout walk ratio, allowed 3 earned runs in 7 innings. I don't think I expect that to continue, man, because who the hell is this guy? I mean, look at his career stats, man. He started pitching back in 2014. His stats have never been good over his entire career, really. He's never even had a full season in Major League Baseball, really. So, what is there to like about this guy, really? His season where he pitched the most, he had 12 starts in 2019 I guess he had almost a full season split across Oakland. Oh, and he's back on Oakland now. Weird. Split across Oakland and Baltimore in 2019, but his numbers weren't good that season either. His numbers have been really bad over his entire career. So do you weigh his entire career or do you weigh his 1 start there? I think you weigh his career over that 1 start. I mean, there's just nothing to like about this man. I mean, there's a reason why he hasn't stuck in the majors, and he had a big gap between 2019 and 2022 where he didn't play at all. He only made 5 appearances in 2022, which are all in relief. So he hasn't, before this season, he hadn't made a start since 2019. So maybe he was just pumped up for that 1 start, but there's really nothing to like about him, man. He's barely pitched in the majors, basically, even though he's 34. So it's kind of like he's a guy that just needs to come in to fill like a rotation spot, basically, and you have nobody else. Like, what is there to say about him? He's a journeyman pitcher who really even hasn't had that much of a journey, where he hasn't even pitched that much in Major League Baseball at all, really. And when he has, his career stats, 6.45 ERA, 1.49 whip, terrible numbers, very high numbers there. 135 strikeouts and 187 innings, not good. Doesn't come in and strike guys out. Very low strikeout rate and 56 walks, not great either, really. So I just don't think there's anything to really like about this. And then up against Colorado's hitters, they haven't seen him before, but I don't even think that really matters, man. Based on who he is and based on his career, he's not a dominant pitcher that's going to come in. I don't think it's going to really matter that much of these hitters have not seen him before. Stallings is the only hitter who's seen him before, and he's 0 for 1 off him. But I think there's just nothing that you can really take away from that. I prefer Quantrill, the younger guy who has had the better career, as sad as that sounds. Brooks, your career has been significantly worse than Quantrill. Sorry. So I'm going to jump in and take Colorado for all those reasons, for the situation and the pitching matchup. Both line up for me on Colorado, plus 115, I think is the best you can do on that one. And the Chicago Cubs as well, plus 110. And Boston Celtics in basketball, minus 9.5. Let's do it. Peace.